All right, scholars, this is our listen and respond for the week of 11/11. If you are in green or purple group, this is the story we are working on today. So make sure you have your name at the top and make sure you have the date. So like 13. So it'll be 11/13 or 11/14, depending on what your group color is. So this is a story we are reading today. A Bad Case of the Stripes by David Shannon. Okay, so I notice on the front there's a girl and she has a thermometer in her mouth. And then I notice she has all these colorful stripes across her, and maybe she's laying in bed. It looks like she's got some pillows and a blanket. Let's look at the back. The back says, Camilla Cream loves lima beans, but she never eats them. Why? Because the other kids in her school don't like them, and Camilla Cream is very, very worried about what other people think of her. In fact, she's so worried that she's about to break out in a bad case of stripes. Oh my goodness. So that's telling us a little bit about the story. So now we can go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and write our title. Remember, we capitalize the words in a title. A Bad Case of Stripes. So then now we previewed the front cover. So you're going to tell me, what do you think this book is going to be about? I think this book will be about blank. Another thing this book might be about is blank. So these two, please don't make them match. They should not be the same. You should come up with two different ideas about what you think this book will be about. Why do you think this? I think this because I see it on the front cover. I think this because I see it on the back cover. I think this because I got sick one time, right? So you're coming up with what you think this book will be about based off of your own experiences and based off of what you see on the front cover and what you read on the back cover. All right, the next thing we need to be worrying about are our characters and setting. Readers know that understanding the characters and setting of a story will help them to better understand what is going on in the story. List the characters from the story here. There's 3 spots. What do you know about them? There's 3 things for each person. I would at least do 2. Please do at least 2. All right, so let's go ahead and get started reading and see if we can figure out what's going on with Camilla Cream. All right. Ooh, let's see. How do I get this in there? Let's do it like that. All right. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what the other people thought of her. Today, she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Okay. Her mother ran into the room and she screamed too. Oh my heavens! She cried, you're completely covered with stripes! This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. Do you feel all right? She asked. I feel fine, Camilla answered, but just look at me. You get back in bed this instant, her mother ordered. You're not going to school today. Camilla was relieved. I lost my spot. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. There she is lying in bed with her stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. Most extraordinary, he exclaimed. I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching? No, Camilla told him. I feel fine. Well then, Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me. And off he went. Here he is examining Camilla. All right, the next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. All right, let's go ahead and write down some of the characters we have so far, just so we get an idea of what's happening here. So first of all, we have Camilla. All right, and then we have, I'm not sure who else we need to include. Let's read the rest of the story, and then we might need to come back and fill in the blanks on who are the most important characters that we need to include here. So what do we know about Camilla? She loves lima beans. Would that be an inner trait or an outer trait? I think that's an inner trait because they had to tell us, right? We can't tell that by looking at someone. We had to know by the way she acted. And then I want you to try to come up with an outer trait about Camilla, which shouldn't be too hard. If you look at her, you ought to be able to tell an outer trait about her, right? Okay. So then what is the setting of the story? So I'm noticing that this story is happening in more than one place. So you can pick either, you can write both of them, you can pick one of them or the other, just whatever you think it is going to go here. And please remember that the setting is a place that you should be able to visit if you needed to or could or like had the means. If your answer to this question is not a place you could go, then you need to change it. So the setting is always going to be a location or a place. And then we want to know, how does the setting match with what is happening with the characters? So this question is basically asking you, why did this author pick this setting for this story to happen? So think about things that normally happen when you're sick. Where do you normally stay when you're sick? Think about things that normally happen when you say the Pledge of Allegiance. Where are you normally at when you say the Pledge of Allegiance? And think about why would they pick these locations instead of a different location, instead of like the mall or the beach or the park? Why do you think they picked the places that they did to put this story instead of a different place? Why does it match? Okay. Then the next question we need to worry about is making a prediction. So make a prediction. A prediction is when readers guess what might happen next in the story. So remember, a prediction is a guess. So that's what we're going to be thinking about next. Let's go ahead and keep reading and see where that takes us. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard," and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon, everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago, everyone liked her. Now, nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Oh my goodness, okay. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I'd better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialist went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grop. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one of each before bed," said Dr. Grop. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. All right, so let's stop here. Let's go ahead and make a prediction about what might happen next. So what do you think might happen next? Something I think might happen next is blank. I think this because blank. Another thing I think might happen next is blank. I think this because blank. So I'm going to say something I think might happen next is these pills will not help Camilla with her stripes. I think this because the doctors did not seem to know what was wrong. So I don't think those medicines are going to work. If you want to copy my first answer, I would do that, but make sure your next answer is something completely different. And then we can go on and keep reading. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different. But when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Oh my goodness, did anybody predict that that would happen? That is, wow. I had no idea that was coming. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called, but this time, instead of the specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Gourd and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gourd finally spoke. "It might be a virus," he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. "Or possibly some form of bacteria," said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. "Or it could be a fungus," added Dr. Gourd. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers again back at the lab," Dr. Gourd explained. "We'll call you when we know something." But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. "Close your eyes," she said. "Breathe deeply and become one with your room." "I wish you hadn't said that," Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. "What are we going to do?" cried Mrs. Cream. "It just keeps getting worse and worse." She began to sob. All right, let's go ahead and pause here because we need to talk about visualizing. So I am going to have you guys visualize. Remember, visualize means that readers are thinking about how this story might look in their heads. You're making a mind movie in your brain. So you're imagining what you're reading and you're seeing it as if there weren't any illustrations in the story, okay? So what do you think this part of the story might look like, and why do you think this? I'm imagining the part in the story where blank is happening. I'm imagining it looks like blank. 3 things to describe this are blank, blank, blank. I think this part looks like this because blank. All right, so the part that we need to copy down is I'm imagining the part in the story where Camilla becomes one with her room. So Camilla becomes one with her room. Camilla is Camila, becomes Becomes, one, One, with With, her, Her, room, Room. So now we have, I'm imagining the part in the story where Camilla becomes one with her room is happening. There shouldn't be a period there. I don't know why I always do that. I'm imagining it looks like blank. 3 things to describe this are blank, blank, blank. Okay, so here on this line, this is where you can tell me what it looks like in one word. You're kind of giving me a vague answer. When you give a vague answer, that means you're not giving me a lot of information about it. You're just kind of summarizing it. It doesn't really tell me too terribly much about it. So like we could say it looks scary, it looks happy, it looks friendly, it looks funny, it looks weird. So anything that you think it would look like in one word could go right here. Then down here, we're going to describe it. Describe means to tell or explain. We want to be very, very specific here. Specific means that we're giving details. We're telling exactly what we see. We're giving as much information as we can about what we see. So 3 things to describe this are, I'm going to say, let's see, colorful, colorful spots on the wall. So I'm thinking that there's going to be colorful spots on the wall. You could come up with 2 other things that you think this will look like. Then I want you to tell me why you think this. What do you know about, I mean, this isn't a real life thing, so you guys, you can't really use background knowledge because this doesn't really happen. So let's think about it like based off of what the story said. What do you think it's going to look like? Why do you think it would look like that? Once you finish that, you can go ahead and hop to the back. And then the next question we're working on is summarizing it. So what we're going to do is finish the story now, and then we'll come back to summarize. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. "Excuse me," she said brightly, "but I think I can help." Oh my goodness. Hope she can help her. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. "My goodness," she said with a shake of her head. "What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen." She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. "Here," she said, "these might do the trick." "Are those magic beans?" asked Mrs. Cream. "Oh my, no," replied the kind old woman. "There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans." "I'll bet you'd like some, wouldn't you?" she asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big, heaping plateful of lima beans more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. "Yuck," she said. "No one likes lima beans, especially me." "Oh dear," the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you." She put the beans back in her bag and started toward the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good. And being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. "Wait," she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans." "I thought so," the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. "Mmm," said Camilla. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. "I'm cured," she shouted. "Yes," said the old woman. "I knew the real you was in there somewhere." She patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of the stripes again. All right, so now we are ready to summarize what we just read. So readers, think about the most important parts of a book. In your own words, give me a summary of the story you just listened to. The story, blank, talks about blank. In the beginning of the story, blank. In the middle of the story, blank. At the end of the story, blank. So if you'll notice, when I read through the sentence starters, I didn't read the words that were in parentheses. These right here are what we call parentheses. And when you are reading aloud something, you never read what's in the parentheses out loud. That is just to give the person that's reading it extra information. And in this case, it's telling us what needs to go on this line. So it's telling me I need to put the title of the story right here. So the title of the story was A Bad Case of Stripes. So remember, we capitalize the letters, the first letters of each word. We do not capitalize articles or prepositions unless they're the very first word, right? So A would be capitalized in this case because it's the first word of the title. Then we want to put the characters. Who does it talk about? So Camilla and her family, right? I think those are the most important. And then the old lady, maybe. And the old lady. All right, so then now you are coming up with what's going on in the beginning, what's going on in the middle, and then what happens at the end. The way I like to look at this is I like to think, okay, the beginning is what's going on in the beginning. In the middle, was there a problem that happened? And at the end, did they solve that problem? So that's kind of the way I would look at this. Don't forget, you need to go back and add your characters that we came up with. Since we read the whole story, now we have extra characters that we can add. You're going to have to come up with whoever those people are. All right. So once you finish that, you're ready to move on to the blog section. So what you'll do here is you'll open up Google Classroom and start a new post. And then you pick one of these options to answer. Okay. You can either choose making connections or story continued. If you choose making connections, you're going to think about how this book is similar to your own lives. You're going to title the post Making Connections to a Bad Case of Stripes. And then you're going to write about the part in the book that you can connect to. And then you're going to write about how you connect to it, what happened in your own life that made you connect to it. So maybe you like something that everybody else thinks is weird. And so you could feel you understand how Camila felt. Or maybe you like lima beans, or maybe something similar has happened to you before. I don't know. If you don't want to do that one, or you don't have a connection, you can do the story continued. Readers, think about what might happen next if the book were to keep going. You're going to title the post A Bad Case of Stripes Continued, and then you're going to write about what would happen next in the story. Please remember, you can't write something that's already happened in the story. A lot of us tend to do that. You need to keep going and tell me what would different that would happen after the ending. So she was sitting at the end eating lima beans, I think, and she never got stripes again, but the kids were calling her weird, but she didn't care. So what is something that you think she might do that after that story ended? Once you finish this, make sure that your name is on it. Please turn it into me. Then if you haven't finished your word work for this week, you can work on that. If you have, you can switch to IXL or Lexia, or you can read Epic or your book. Please, if you have questions about this, raise your hand and we can come and help you.